So in preparation for this midweek study, you might open your Bibles to Deuteronomy Chapter 28, and we're going to be studying together verses 1 through 12. Verses 1 through 12. So an angel appeared at a faculty meeting and told the dean that because of his unselfish service, he will be rewarded with either wealth, wisdom, or beauty. Without hesitating, the dean selects wisdom. "It is done," said the angel, and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. All of the other members of the faculty stared at the dean with amazement. One finally came up with the courage to lean over and whisper and said, "Now that you have infinite wisdom, Dean, say something." And the dean closed his eyes and then opened it again and said, "I should have took the money." We have a unique relationship with our money. Most of the world doesn't have any. So they establish their position in society in many, many different ways, and it's usually not money. In Africa, for example, uniforms are just super important because nobody has money. Every position that you have has a designated uniform. The kids wear uniforms from their very first day of preschool all the way through college. They all wear the same thing. And the reason for that is because it hides the rich kids from the poor kids, because they all wear the same thing. And then as they get to be adults, whatever minor office you may have or function or job, it has its own uniform. So you can put that on and feel good about yourself, even though most of the day you live in rags working on your half-an-acre parcel of ground to get enough food to live. But we in America and most of Western civilization have a different approach to our money. Let me ask you a question. In what ways does our culture pressure us to love money? Let me ask it a different way. Why is it so difficult for us to maintain the proper perspective when it comes to our money? In Deuteronomy Chapter 28, listen to this. Now, these words are not spoken necessarily to individuals, but to the nation of Israel itself. Listen. "If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all of his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on the earth. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You'll be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land, and the young of your harvest, the calves of your herd, and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. You'll be blessed when you come in, and you'll be blessed when you go out. The Lord will grant that the enemies who rise against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but flee from you in seven. The Lord will send a blessing on your barns and on everything you put your hand to. The Lord your God will bless you in the land he's given you. And the Lord will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you an oath. If you keep the commands of the Lord your God and walk in obedience to him, then all the peoples on earth will see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they'll fear you. And the Lord will grant you abundant prosperity. In the fruit of your womb, the young of your livestock, the crops of your ground, in the land he swore to your ancestors to give you. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season and to bless all the works of your hands. And you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. So in this passage, we understand the relationship that the early Jews had when it came to prosperity. They believed it was a direct blessing from God. They believed that prosperity was given to the righteous. Righteousness meant money. Things have changed quite a deal. We normally don't see that anymore. What happened with the Pharisees coming on into the time of Jesus is they still maintain this idea that righteous people have money. And because of that, they are to be honored and placed at a more elite standing in their society. That's why the Pharisees talked so much and hoarded their money, because the more money you had, the closer to God you were. And they believed that one had everything to do with the other. The bigger house you had, the better it was to prove that you are from God. The golden covered chariot that you rode through the streets in, well, it simply told everybody how close to God you were. And the clothing that you wear, that's going to make everybody understand how truly righteous you are. That's why it was so important to them. Because in reality, you can only live in one house. One house at a time. You can only drive one car at a time. So what difference does it make? The Rolls Royce doesn't get you any there quicker than the Chevy does. The clothes you wear, they got to be decent and they got to be clean. But other than that, they serve no function other than to keep you warm in this cooling temperature we're going into winter. It's only status that really puts the value behind our money. It's only to impress the people around us that we feel we need to have the best. And if it means more debt, we'll do it in a heartbeat. So important is that to us. Christ shatters all of the conceptions regarding what money does and how money is used and what it truly means. And that imposes upon us a number of questions that ought to be questions we ask ourselves. But what he says so clearly here is that relationships are more valuable than excessive wealth. Let me take you to what I'm talking about. It's found in Luke chapter 16. Two great stories, the story of the shrewd manager and then the rich man and Lazarus, say a lot about money. Let's look together. This is the Gospel of Luke chapter 16, and we'll begin with the story of the shrewd manager, which is a fascinating story. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master's taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil. And the manager said, take your bill, sit down quietly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master found out, but listen, the master commended the dishonest manager. Can you imagine? This guy was making deals for himself, and the master was going to have to pay for it. And yet, the master recognized one great truth. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly, for the people of the world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. The spiritual point of this is clear. Relationships are more valuable than money. People are more valuable than money. A man with many friends, a man with godly friends, is much more benefited than a man by himself in a big house. Understand this gospel lesson. It is telling us that our relationships are of the highest particular importance to our lives. A guy by the name of Abraham Maslow, and I know you've heard that name, came up with something called Maslow's pyramid. And according to Maslow, human needs are arranged from the most urgent to the highest levels. And at the bottom of this pyramid, there is our physiological needs. We need air, food, and water. Next up on that pyramid comes our safety needs. We need security, freedom from anxiety, chaos. We need some law and order in our lives. And then there is something called belonging needs. That is acceptance, intimacy, affection. Then there are esteem needs. We need a degree of self-respect and recognition. We need some independence and some dignity. But at the very top of the pyramid was something called self-actualization, is what Maslow called it. And that is when you fully have reached your potential. Everything that we have in life materially should work so that we achieve our potential here on earth, with our family, with our jobs, but more than anything, with our God. I will use my money to make sure that I do everything I can during the short time I'm here on earth to make an eternal difference. Where most people fail is they assume that if they had more of the same kind, that would be better. That would be better. So if you, I remember as a kid, my dad made the greatest pancakes in the world. They were very thin like crepes. They had chunks of bacon in them. I mean, when we had this Saturday morning breakfast, it was always my dad's pancakes. And I loved them. And I couldn't get enough of them. And so one time when I was alone in the house, I went into the kitchen and I made myself pancakes using Dad's exact recipe. And they were good. But I made a stack like this tall. And I can tell you as a young kid, having more of that didn't make it better. It made it worse. Much, much worse. I'd like to tell you that that's why I gave up pancakes, but that'd be a lie. This unjust business manager, he knew that his termination was imminent. He knew he couldn't do the physical work, and he knew that his pride wouldn't allow him to beg. So what he determined to do was to make sure that he could ingratiate himself to his friends, so that when he had nothing to eat and nowhere to live, he could count on them. And he used his master's money to do it. But this master, who we believe to have been a wealthy man, even with all of his possessions, he commended this shrewd and dishonest manager by saying, "You did right. Invest in your relationships. That's what'll make you truly wealthy." Jesus wasn't approving of his dishonesty, but he was giving him a commendation to know exactly how that works. Now, relationships are more valuable than excessive wealth. We know that to be the case. The second truth that we find from this is that the management of my resources is really a heart issue. It really has to do with our heart. Some of us are good at stretching money. Some of us would be broke no matter how much money we had. Learning how to deal with money is a really good thing. When Sandy and I got married, I had no idea how to deal with money. I kind of grew up with some wealth in my home, and so I had anything I ever wanted. And when the time came that Sandy and I were married, I simply couldn't fathom the idea that we didn't have any money to do the things we wanted to do. I mean, honey, we got checks in the checkbook. I know we got money. But Sandy grew up a much different way, and she understood that we had to make every penny count if we wanted to do things that were fun or impetuous or spur of the moment. There's a story of a sideshow strongman, and he used to do this with every act. He said he was so powerful and so strong, and he gave this example. He would take a lemon, and he would cut it in half, and he would put both halves, one half in one hand, one half in the other, and he would squeeze and squeeze, and the juice would come out in torrents. Squeeze and squeeze. And then he handed those out, and he says, I'll give $100 to anybody in the audience that can get one more drop out of these lemons. A frail little guy put his hand up immediately, walked up, took one of those halves of that lemon, and he squeezed, and to everybody's amazement, he got another drop of juice to fall out. And the strong man, as he was getting the money out of his pocket and dealing it out, he looked at this little guy and he said, how in the world did you know how to get another drop of juice out of that lemon? And he said, well, you know, I've been doing it for years. I have been the treasurer at our church for the last 30 years. He knew how to get money where there wasn't any. He knew how to make things work. Some of us are good at this, and many others of us aren't. And we deal with those bad choices and bad decisions, and hopefully over time we begin to learn and to grow how to be more responsible with our money. There are a lot of realities that really have to do with our money. We ought to quit fooling ourselves. We ought to quit fooling ourselves. If you're not faithful with the money you now have in a typical salary in your giving to the Lord, that wouldn't change if you made more money. That's just the reality. If you don't attend church regularly, you won't attend it more when you retire. If you don't give with the money you have now, you wouldn't give any more if you had more money. And if you don't attend worship with the time that you have now, when you have more time than that in retirement, you won't attend anymore. These are the brutal realities of the choices that we make. Someone or something has got to be number one in your life. And if it's not God now, you need to choose to make him to sit upon that throne of your life. Management of our resources is a matter of our heart. And a large investment portfolio, a big house, the ability to travel without concern, you're prospering during the time of this coronavirus, and the money that you've had in your bank account or have right now just does not impress God. Does not. What does impress God is what we do with what we have in the relationships that we build throughout this life. In the story of the rich man and Lazarus, we begin in verse 19. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now listen. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died, and he was buried. And in Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus at his side. So upon their death they were judged. Upon their death we will be judged as well. Today is the day of our salvation, because when those days are over for us, our judgment is sure. And for the rich man and for Lazarus, they both experienced two very different realities. Now, according to rabbinic tradition, the idea of what the afterlife would look like is you would have righteous people on one side of a river, and those in torment or in Gehenna or hell or the grave were on the other side of the river. And according to rabbinic tradition, they could see each other. And according to Luke 16, that is the case. Lazarus could see the rich man, and the rich man could see Lazarus. In fact, he says to Lazarus, what I want you to do is give me some water because I'm thirsty in these flames. And Lazarus said, I can't do it. There is between us no man's land, and I can't go over to you. You can't go over to me. The thing that's most difficult about going to hell, and the most constant notion you have about the reality of the choices you made, is something called regret. You can see those in heaven, and you regret for that eternal life of yours that you hadn't made different choices. Money's not evil. Use it to build your relationships. Use it to faithfully serve the cause of Christ. All status, all symbols of our prosperity will be destroyed. But our service to Jesus Christ is the only thing that we'll take with us into heaven.